I'm a tech guy. I've been speaking for a long time, and the presentation beforehand is my kind of presentation. I love actionable takeaways. I love really nuts and bolts. Give me the blocking and tackling, and this one's not going to be that. Because a lot of what I'm going to share about is really what I've been successful with for the last 3 years. And for me, I pivoted my career. I took a massive change in what I was doing. And I went from being in cybersecurity for the Department of Defense and working at a cloud computing and data center company to really trying to invest and work with brands on how they can tell their story better in a social business type perspective. And when I pivoted my career, not only would I not be able to get on stage or get in front of a client, but most people didn't know who I was. I left an industry that was very close-knit, that was very small in a sense of what they were doing, and I wanted to pivot. And I worked really hard at pretty much pivoting and telling my story in as many ways as I possibly could. And ultimately, over the last 3 years, it's given me the opportunity to travel the world. I've worked with the largest brands in the world, doing things from Snapchat campaigns to Facebook Live to Periscope. I do workshops on personal branding. I'm able to do a lot of the things that really, you hear that notion, chase your passion or follow your passion. And for me, so much of that has come true, and it's not the blocking and tackling. It actually comes down to a couple different things, and really things that I've been able to really just focus on, and it started with being myself. And being myself, you know, it sounds kind of easy, but I can tell you, if you think social media is hard, the first 8 months of my pivot, social media was extremely hard. I hated it. I've had to put so much work into every tweet, into every post. I had to think, what does everybody else want me to do? What do I need to share that everybody else wants to hear? And I was this close to like quitting and going back and working in the data center company. The bar was low. I had figured that out because really social media was hard for me. And something that I had prided myself on, my dad growing up was born and raised in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, very proud of, proud of my background. And my dad had always instilled in us, you know, failure happens, life happens, you treat other people like you want to be treated. And he also reminded us always to always be yourself. And it's something that I took pride in. It was in high school, I was the only kid that wanted to work in computers. I surfed every morning, and I was a thespian in high school, right? Like, I did what I wanted to do. I focused on my passions. And so for me, why could I not do that in social media or in digital? I kind of put a barrier between the two. And really what it comes down to is time's changed. This entire concept, really what's going on has changed. And I'm a proud dad of 3 little girls under 7 years old. And for me, I think they're going to grow up in the greatest time in our world. And the reason I believe in that is it really has so much to do with social media and the internet as a whole. Because growing up in Pittsburgh, I have family that have never left the state. Many have only driven 1 to 2 hours away from their house in Pittsburgh. And so their exposure to the world, their ability to not feel alone, their ability to relate and find new people that understand who they are, what they do, is really limited by the physical location that they go, where they travel. That's changing. I have business partners and friends in 4 countries. You're able to actually walk the streets. I walk the streets of New York City every single day with a live streamer named Jeff Goldberg, who's here in New York City, that live streams different events and locations around New York City. I would go to sleep listening to a saxophonist down at Grand Central. I'm able to do that because of internet, live streaming, social media. And really, for me, I don't care if you like underwater basket weaving, you like dyeing your hair blue, and you like doing it in bright-colored socks. I believe we can find people and we can discover and relate with people that have some similar passion. Or maybe they also like that kind of thing. And to me, that's what the world we're living in today. But I'm also not naive to think that the world isn't extremely noisy. Life is noisy, digital is noisy. My grandfather always reminded me growing up in Pittsburgh, he said, son, I had 3 TV channels. I had no remote, and so that oftentimes meant I was too lazy to even go up and have the channel. So I received my news, my content, my information from 1 channel. Now we have hundreds of thousands of places that we can get our information, that we can engage. It seems like there's a new social media platform, a live streaming platform coming up every week. Every time you talk to a new marketing agency, if you're a business, they're going to tell you what new platform. You need to be on Snapchat. You need to be on all these things. All of these things are noise, right? And the noise can be crazy. And I'm a FOMO guy, the fear of missing out. I love living on that edge and understanding what's out there. But I don't believe that means you need to be everywhere. You just have to come to the realization that life is noisy. And that's kind of what we're dealing with right now. And how do we get through the noise? How do we figure this out? And you'll hear things like work-life balance. Well, work-life balance, I believe, is a joke. It's a myth. Because today, I remember, I worked for the Department of Defense, and the first time I traveled to Iraq, I didn't have a BlackBerry the very first time in Iraq. And the second time I went to Iraq and Afghanistan, I had a BlackBerry, and it was a completely different experience. But going there and being completely disconnected from the world, sitting there on the ground and figuring out like, wow, this is a completely different space. And one of my jobs was actually to enable the firewall in Iraq to allow Facebook. Because one of the generals had just got his stay extended 4 months. And that was his only negotiating chip. The only thing he asked for when they asked him to stay was, can you please give me access to Facebook? Well, I was the guy that was like, wait, why? He said, I feel as close to my granddaughter as I have any time in my entire life. I have a bad day, whatever I'm doing, no matter what I'm doing, my life is my work is my life, but I'm able to connect to that using Facebook. And I blew my mind, because I was in Iraq. He actually had one of his posts was inside of Saddam Hussein's palace. And so we were enabling Facebook to reach there. And really what I want to kind of break that down to is, it's not work-life balance, it's life. And it's not online and offline, it's life. Online can be so hard and so stressful if you're trying to put something online that is not you. And we've heard things about catfishing, and we've heard things about what you're doing. And I believe it comes down to telling your story and being yourself. And it's the same way we do it offline. When someone talks to me and says, what do I share online, or how much should I share? I'm very transparent. But it's because I've managed my own risk versus rewards. If you feel that when you're face-to-face with people, you don't share certain things, don't share those same things online. But don't think of the two things as two different worlds. You have to kind of embrace and understand both. And that's what I call life. Now, I believe there's two great shifts in the mindset, and this is what I have up here on the screen. We have a massive shift, because for every brand, for every marketing, for every sales, they believed for the longest time that they could control the message. They could control what was being said about them. They could control what was going on. Well, I believe control is an illusion. Control is an absolute illusion. We cannot control anything. We can set up swim lanes, and I like to say swim lanes. Because if you think of a swim lanes bob back and forth. You can kind of push it a little bit so it doesn't break, but ultimately you can live within these swim lanes. So it's not about controlling the message, rather empowering it and telling it yourself. And then the second one is perfection is a fairy tale. And really the reason that I believe in that is nobody believes a brand is perfect. Nobody believes you are perfect. If you're sitting at home right now and you're watching this on the stream, raise your hand if you believe you're perfect. I can't see you, but if you did, you're lying. And you didn't, it's because we all know that we're not perfect. So why as a brand, why as a person on social media, do we want to try to convey that? Do we want to relay that we are perfect? If we all know that we're not perfect, we need to take down that barrier. We need to stop thinking and trying to provide information at perfection. And live streaming is actually the catalyst for this. Because for brands, I helped launch IBM's very first Periscope. I took over the SAP account for 5 days last week. And you know what their risk was? Very heavily. They had to trust me. But they didn't put control in there. They didn't ask for me to be perfect. They asked for me to relay their message, convey their story, help provide value to their audience, and ultimately enjoy myself. That's SAP. That's a large brand. That's IBM. I like to say, if IBM can do it, that's Big Blue. What is our excuse? So it's no longer about understanding. And a lot of the things you've heard today about live streaming or Snapchat or the new domains, all of these things, I think the fundamental foundation comes down to understanding that it is no longer about control and perfection. And then once we understand that, once we get over control and perfection, transparency is a powerful element. Because transparency really does allow people to understand and allows us to empower our own vulnerabilities. I share very openly. I'm an entrepreneur. I struggle every day as an entrepreneur. I have a roller coaster ride. I think every entrepreneur can relate to that. It's a great day today. Tomorrow I wake up, I feel like I need to throw up, and something's changed. But I also love the chaos. I love what's going on there. And for me, I'm also proud. I was diagnosed ADHD at 31 years old. It's part of me. It's who I am. And when I told people that, and I said it publicly, the amount of outpouring of love and thank you for sharing that. Oh my goodness, for embracing that. And I said, wait, for sharing who I was? That is who I am. And I think for me, what has been really successful for me is it's not about selling people on my value. It's about being myself and letting them into my world. And that's what transparency is. Now let's remember, transparency does not mean oversharing. These are two different things. We don't want to know that you're sitting on the toilet. We don't really need to know every single thing you eat. Transparency is that window into who you are. And transparency is going to be different for every person, and it's going to be a different level of transparency. If you don't want to share certain things, don't share those things. But also understand risk versus reward and where this kind of fit in. Because ultimately, nobody's believing you when you say, trust me, right? When you say trust me, the first thing we say is, what are they going to lie to us about? But the way to build trust, the way to prove that you're authentic, is to be transparent and let people in. And to me, that is the game changer. The second part is, and I'm running a book, and one of my chapters of my book is the future of innovation is collaboration. I believe together we can do amazing things, especially innovating. We have Help Erase here. Together we all sharing the Help Erase message to try to end child trafficking. Ultimately, one person screaming that message from the rooftop, I don't care if it's Beyonce, does not reach enough people. Together, we have to work together to share those messages. The interesting thing is, we've always heard that, but I believe we kind of approached it and said, we want to surround people around us that know what we know and say yes to us, right? You know, the idea, we want a bunch of yes men. Well, a bunch of yes men is failed. We know that's a failed flaw. But I can tell you, one of my strongest skill sets that has allowed me to succeed is knowing what I don't know. And I'm sure as hell not afraid of admitting to it. If you guys have heard me if you follow me on any of my channels, I probably admit when I'm wrong more than I talk about anything I do right, because I probably have done more things wrong and had predictions. Like I got on stage and I said, in March of last year, I said, Meerkat is a game changer. You need to invest in it. It's not like it's going to disappear in a year. Unfortunately, Meerkat disappeared about a year later. But ultimately, for what I convey, what this kind of goes into, is understanding that it's okay to fail. It's okay to be wrong. The most powerful phrase in live streaming, the reason live streaming is taking off from an authenticity pace, is why politicians are not on there. They cannot say, I don't know. The most powerful phrase in live streaming is, I don't know. Because when you say, I don't know, when someone asks you a question, and then you deliver something and you say, this is what I do know, guess what? That adds validity to your message. We now not only know that you're not perfect, because we already knew that ahead of time, but we also now understand that when I'm passionate about everything. But I can tell you, you ask me something about building a sales funnel for your organization, for your small, medium-sized business, that's not my repertoire. I work telling your digital story. I'm going to tell you I don't know. But then I'm going to tell you where storytelling fits in your sales cycle. I do know that. And by admitting what you don't know, it allows people to understand and build that authenticity and trust. Now, as a tech guy and someone that suffers from FOMO, the fear of missing out, I'm beta testing 9 apps on the 5 different phones that I own, just for me. I have 5 phones, mainly because I do a lot of stuff in the live streaming space with Ryan, and we always want to make sure our phone is working on the right network. So I have a couple on T-Mobile, a couple on AT&T. So I'm the tech guy. My last job, my dream job, I built it after Guy Kawasaki and Robert Scoble, and I wanted to be a tech evangelist. Because for so long, I believed technology was my purpose. Technology is what fueled my passion. Well, that's shifted. I don't really care about the technology. I don't even care about the new iPhone that comes out. I care about how that's going to impact me and why I should care. I don't care about the product itself. And that shift allows me to understand technology. Technology is, we are not purchasing or looking at technology for technology's sake. We believe in leveraging technology for the experience that it actually allows us to convey, or the experience we are able to actually take on. So when someone tells me to unplug, I unplugged at a concert. I went to the Gorge up there in western United States to see Dave Matthews Band, and I said, you know what? I'm so tired of everybody telling me to unplug. I'm just going to unplug. I'm going to unplug. I uninstalled every social media app off of my phone. The only thing, because my phone is my camera, so I had to have that aspect. So my phone was on me, but I didn't have any social media. On the drive back after I left the Gorge, I put Facebook back on, I opened it up, and a childhood friend I had grown up with for the longest time was at that concert. That was messaging me on Facebook Messenger and messaging me on Twitter and wanted to share that experience that I was having at the Gorge. Unfortunately, we never crossed paths. I still haven't even hung out with him since that day, and that was probably about 8 years ago. But for me, what that really means is technology isn't the problem. It's how we use it and the experience we want to get out of it. So every time you see a new shiny object, don't focus on the object, focus on how it will impact you, what it'll enable you to do. Maybe it'll make you more productive. Maybe it'll make you have less hours managing email and more time at home with your kids. Or maybe you like to go to Times Square, or maybe you like to go see a Broadway show. We look at technology too often as for what it's actually doing, and that's not the impact that it makes to us. And so for me, I live on all the social networks because my clients hire me to understand what's available. But I never recommend for any client to be everywhere, and I don't recommend we all look at it that way. And that's a tech guy talking about it. The second thing is actually, in my job, my last career, when I was working at Department of Defense and then at a data center company, one of the hardest things people have heard, and I think you guys have probably all heard it, prove to me the ROI. Or, as an entrepreneur, it seems like every other day right now, you have a really bad day. And how many here focus hours on the bad news and minutes on the good news? Right? If you're not willing to spend the same time celebrating your wins, then you sure as heck shouldn't spend that same amount of time dealing with the failures or the things that life kind of throws in your face. And what I mean by that is, I came up with this philosophy, and I call it screenshot awesomeness. And everybody in my group, I have 32 employees, they all had to do this. Every message they got that was good, every email that they got good, every time they're hanging out with somebody, they would take a picture. And it doesn't even have to be a picture on your phone, it can be a picture, you paint the picture. You take a screenshot of awesomeness, and then everybody on their desktop had what I called the portfolio of awesomeness. And I kind of like crazy words and those kind of things. And what it meant was, anytime you had a bad day, anytime you had someone hating on you, someone said, you suck, your YouTube comments are bad. Rather than dwelling on that, you pull open your bucket of awesomeness, your portfolio, and you get reminded of the good things we do. And it's weird when you do it, trust me, because you're like, I'm screenshotting like a thank you tweet, I'm screenshotting, and when you're doing it, it feels very small. But when you're down, or when you have to prove the ROI, I mean, for me, for a social media manager, it's the best thing. 45 days after you start screenshotting awesomeness, and that manager comes to you and says, prove to me what you've done that's well. If you didn't have that portfolio, you'll go, well, I did this, I have these really crazy vanity metrics that mean absolutely nothing for the business, and I think I did, that's my ROI. Or you go back to this portfolio of all of the good things that happened. I can tell you one of the biggest things for me happened, and it happened for my own portfolio after I had already kind of taught this for my team, is I had someone come to me and say, Brian, I know you do this whole portfolio of awesome. He's like, can you show me like some of the things that you have? And I had this little client called CenturyLink. And CenturyLink had sent a message to our Twitter account. They hadn't got a message, so they reached out to my personal Twitter account. Well, I had a back and forth conversation with them that I had screenshotted that was very positive, and they were excited to see. Our largest partnership in the history of that company was with CenturyLink. By looking at that screenshot and looking at the timestamp, their first interaction with our company was that Twitter focus with me, that Twitter conversation with me. I didn't have to prove ROI from that minute on of Twitter, because we've all heard it. Everybody in your company sells. Everybody in your company markets. But ultimately, does everybody in your company record all of these great things that are happening? So I recommend trying it out yourself. When you're doing something great, maybe you just finished running. Take a picture of yourself. You don't have to post it, because I know some people still are living in this perfection world. Or maybe you'll add a filter to Instagram. But put it onto a folder on your phone. Add it to an Evernote document. Because I can promise you, it helps you deal with the downs, and it allows you to prove the ups matter. Now, telling your story is an interesting one, because storytelling to me is my favorite thing to study. I study every presentation. I've spent a lot of time looking at storytelling. And the cool thing about storytelling is you can never get it right, because every audience changes, every message changes, every value proposition in these variables change. Just in how someone's changing, if someone leaves the room, that changes how the story is actually conveyed. And the reason storytelling is so powerful is it comes down to this. When you see LeBron James repping a Kia on a commercial, do you believe that LeBron James drives a Kia? Do you believe LeBron James, when he says, this is a great car, look at the radio, has he ever used the radio for himself? But Vincenzo here, who you saw on stage a little bit earlier, he was just at a Kia outing in San Diego a couple days ago, and they were test driving the Kia, and inside they're Snapchatting and live streaming and creating all this content. And you know why I would buy a Kia? It's not because of LeBron James. It's because the story that Vincenzo and the influencers of that brand were able to tell, because I could relate. Storytelling comes down to listening and relating to your audience. And that is a powerful element, and it's been the key for me. I listen and I consume way more content than I post, which is funny for most because I tweet a lot, I Snapchat a lot, I Periscope a lot, but for me, I also consume a lot because I'm always learning. I always want to understand. And people would say, Brian, why are you consuming Snapchat? You're pushing the boundaries there. And I'm saying, I'm pushing the boundaries because my audience is actually understanding and being able to relate. If I'm no longer listening to my audience and my audience changes, how could I continue to do that? And so for me, understanding that is key. Another essential one for me is consistency. Consistency, consistency. You guys understand what I'm saying? Consistency. Because in the digital world, we just talked about life is noisy. Everyone tells me I want to stand out from the noise, and I'm doing exactly what Gary Vaynerchuk is doing, and nobody can see me. Well, no kidding, you're in his dust. But the basics of this comes down to when someone Googles your name or someone looks for you, if they can't understand your story on every channel or every place, it doesn't have to be the exact story, but understanding who you are, the foundation of who you are, then they will never remember you. And in this digital world that is not only crazily busy, but the chaos that exists, the best way to stand out from the noise is being consistent. Live streaming is live. It doesn't mean you don't need a strategy. It doesn't mean you can't make an appointment. It doesn't mean you can't schedule things. Because in our world now, with all of this craziness and chaos, we do have to understand consistency allows people to discover us. If you Google my name right now, I can guarantee you can go to page 4, and as long as the result of me, probably put iSocialFanz in, you will be able to understand that in that, whatever page you go to, if it's a page that I could control or a page that I could update, you'll be able to understand. I talk fast, tweet faster. I'm a proud dad, born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I love what I do. Because that is my story, and I want to say it everywhere and anywhere. There's a lot of things that kind of live in our world, and there's a lot of things that when I tell people, be yourself. Be yourself is hard. I lost clients that said, wait a second, Brian, you have tattoos? I don't support people that have tattoos. Well, I'm glad we're not working together because you weren't my perfect client to begin with. But that's scary. And trust me, at that time was not a time where I felt like I could just get rid of clients. But I can tell you, as I got more comfortable being myself, social media and digital got easier. And the number one compliment that I can get when I see anyone that knows me online, the number one compliment is, Brian, you're the exact same person that I talked to online. Because last time I checked, you're talking to me in all those cases. And that, to me, is powerful. So one of the things about that is, remember, if you suck offline, don't be that same person online, but we'll kind of save that for later. So a couple slides here on the idea of, okay, now that we've told our story, where does this fall in? And the chapter in my book that's probably my favorite chapter and how I'm doing it is community is the future of business. Businesses are great because of their great employees. Businesses grow because they have great customers. It's not because of the product or the services that they make. And investing in your community, engaging where your community is today is key. When I was growing my brand, I had a much smaller following than everybody that was on stages that I want to be. And you know what? I figured out I can't build a following as fast as they can unless I buy it, and that just kind of goes against my entire fundamental being. And so what I decided was, you know what? I'm going to out-engage every single person. And out-engage means you reply, you have conversations. It doesn't matter your clout score. It doesn't matter how many followers you have. If you have something to say, you have a question to ask me, I promise you, if you've ever tweeted my account with a question, the person that has answered it of the 135,000 tweets has been me. Because I believe in that conversation that you have to have with the community. And it's not about getting somewhere first. It's about listening to where your community is going. And then understanding life happens, shit happens, change happens. I call myself a change evangelist, no longer a technology evangelist. Because the brands that I work with, they would say, Brian, you ended up ripping out more technology than you had installing it. That's not what we expected. And I quickly realized my passion was not for the technology. I don't even really care what technology you use. Periscope doesn't pay me any money. Facebook doesn't pay me any money. Snapchat doesn't pay me any money. I like defining what your success looks like and helping you get there. And a lot of that comes into a change of mindset, a change in delivery, a change in what you're doing, changing how the event space is going. I love to change how the speaker world's going. These slides, not one of them has ever been seen anywhere else. This was completely customized that I created this week because for me, I want to understand the audience, understand the message, what I want to actually provide and the value. That's not the standard for someone that's speaking 40 times a year. But last time I checked, I don't want to be the standard. I want to be Brian Fanzo. And ultimately, when you're online or you're live streaming, I like to say leverage your digital eyeballs. I tweeted for a long time. I hate posting blogs. Grammar is anything that the English teacher taught me, I was really bad at. And I will not blame the fact that I was not diagnosed ADHD at the time, but a lot of that makes a lot more sense to me because I struggled there. And so maybe video is not for you. Maybe you love talking, but you don't like being on video. You should have a podcast. Maybe you love writing and the video scares you. Maybe what you should do when you are on video is talk about what inspired you to write that blog, how long it took you. I can tell you there's a site called The Verge, and The Verge is a tech site that I never liked anymore. They lost some credibility with me. I was confused on what they were doing. And the minute Periscope came out and they started giving their accounts to their different bloggers, and their bloggers would say, I spent 4 days researching the data on here. This is something I was passionate about. I interviewed 30 people. I would go back and read that article and go, I have a whole lot more respect for them. I now understand about it. And then also, nowhere in that article did it tell me all of those things about the person. I could hear that person reading the blog to me as I read it. Ultimately, by leveraging your digital eyeballs, allowing people to look you in the eyes, or maybe see all your hand movements like I do. I'm Italian, it's just one of those things. Ultimately, that's how we break down the barriers. If you're a brand and you hear return on relationship, read the book from Ted Rubin. But understand that relationships are extremely hard to build in the digital space. I always say it likes to take 18 months for someone to build that relationship. When you leverage your digital eyeballs, you let someone come into you, that you're able to look you in the eye, see that you're authentic, and see that you're passionate, that's a 3-month cycle. We're shaving off all of that time because people, trust me, it is really hard to fake yourself on video. And continue to do it and continue to do it. Last but not least, I hear all the time, Brian, what do you post on social media? My dad said that since the day I started tweeting. Son, what in the world? What do you share? Or like, how much is too much? Or what should my brand post? Or how do I cover a topic? I have a simple rule. Nobody will ever say you're helping too much or providing too much value. And value is a funny word because if you've heard the phrase, I created a viral video that nobody watched, you didn't create a viral video. You created a video that you thought was really good that didn't go viral. Value is not created by the author or the creator, rather the audience that's consuming it. And when you're able to understand the power of your community and listen to your community, that is how you create content that goes viral. It is not creating viral content. It's about creating content that relates to your audience, that speaks to them, that they understand. And so ultimately, when you understand that, nobody will say you care too much or you're helping too much. And this, I'm going to kind of end it here with this idea that I was on a live stream. I was actually doing a live show. And we were on live at Social Business Hour. Rachel and I co-hosted a show for 2 years. And my dad text messaged me, and he said, son, I love what you're doing in social media. My dad's a very successful entrepreneur in the candy business. He owned candy companies all my life. And he said, social media will never replace a handshake. And I thought about it, and I decided to read it out loud on our show. And I said, look, my dad just said, he's like, loves the conversation, but he said social media will never replace a handshake. I said, Dad, you're right. Social media will never replace a handshake. But social media has given me the opportunity to have additional handshakes around the world and opportunities that would have never come to me. And ultimately, if some of the handshakes that I might have been able to have, I like to turn those into hugs and selfies and having fun. My business partner, Ryan and Bell, and I didn't meet each other until Periscope. My other business partner, Daniel Newman, we met on a Twitter chat. I didn't live in Chicago. I had never been to Santa Monica or LA or San Francisco where Ryan was. Social media allowed me to do that, but it allowed me to do that for one fundamental reason. I was myself, and I focused on my own individual change. When you hear people say that they want to change the world or they can do it themselves, they're wrong. What we can do individually is we can change ourselves. And I think when we look at it change, and we look at all these things that I've talked about, if you individually change yourself and everyone does it, together we will change the world. And I firmly believe that. I know it's true, and I'm excited to grow up and have my daughters grow up in the world that we're living in today. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I appreciate it. Be yourself.